power of attorney, estates. It's the stuff no one wants to talk about until it's too late. Today, we're joined by a lawyer who makes it all a little less scary and a lot more manageable. If you've ever thought, do I even need a will? How do I help my parents without overstepping? This episode is for you. Hi, I'm Tracy Mullin. I'm a realtor and a wannabe interior designer, and I'm joined today by Leon Efraim, lawyer and partner at Thomas Efraim. Leon is known for making complex legal issues like wills, estates, and real estate actually make a lot of sense. He's customer first, community focused, and here to help us navigate the big questions with confidence. Leon, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Great. So tell me a little bit, who needs a will?
Well, so I think if you're over 18, you should have a will. But it depends on your circumstances. I think anybody who has children, anybody who has even a single person who's made an investment in a home, I think the best thing you could do is speak to a lawyer that is community-based, someone who either your parents used or someone else, and ask them, should I have a will? My general proposition is every time you have a serious life event, you probably want to create a will.
So like divorce, marriage?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So marriage, again, it depends on whether you're doing it pre-marriage. A lot of people who are like common law partners have no will and then are thinking of getting married and making a will. You should probably, if you're already common law partners, think of having a will because technically, in the eyes of the law, you're not married, but you have certain obligations to each other. And a will would make those things clear. It also, I think, anytime you have people that you have to consider in terms of what would happen if you die, then you need to really consider having a will.
It drives me crazy. I know so many people that don't have wills. I had a friend a couple years ago that passed away, one child, and didn't have a will. What happens when people die that don't have a will? Because I think that's not clear for people. Like, oh, no big deal. It'll go to my wife or it'll go to my children. But what really does happen if they don't have a will?
So for the most part, if you're dealing with assets, I mean, a will really comes into play when there are assets to be dealt with. So if someone has, an 18-year-old child that's in university and for whatever unfortunate circumstance, and by the way, that is obviously one of the saddest things that could ever happen. But, in all likelihood, they have very few assets. And so you will, be able to manage things likely without a will. But anytime, as I said, if you have assets or dependents, then you need to make sure that your estate is in order. So, at the end of the day, I think you use life events, getting married, having a child, the passing of an important relative, or all of these things should be triggers. And again, it doesn't have to be done immediately. Obviously, there's a grieving process that is necessary in most instances where wills are necessary. But once the grieving process is done, or even before it's completely done, you need to think about preparing a will. If you've lost a spouse, you need to look at your will. You may not have to change anything. In all likelihood, you and your spouse prepared your wills together. And if they were prepared properly, then you won't have to change anything. But you need to speak to your lawyer to look at those two wills, see if anything is necessary. And again, depending on how you own your home, if you own a home, you'll probably need a survivorship application. So I think at the end of the day, it's important to think about your estate planning whenever you're thinking about any big decisions.
So any big change. Well, first of all, as you and I both know, the grieving process is never really over. It's kind of like waves that come in and it hits you at times when you're not expecting it. So if you have a will, it certainly takes away the pressure or what did this person want for themselves. Like, how do you just guess what they wanted? So I think having a will is like a really critical portion. So what happens if I don't have a will? I die. What happens to my bank accounts? What happens to my house? So can you kind of take us through, like, do the banks just freeze your accounts and nobody can access it?
Well, they can. So you make a great point. It depends on how you've organized things. So if you and your spouse have joint accounts, or in a lot of cases for elderly people, they've added their children to their accounts. But again, you have to be careful with that, because if you have 3 children, but only one of them lives close by and helps you manage your accounts, putting them on the account might be a dangerous thing. It might lead to problems down the road in terms of your estate. So, again, I think the idea would be that if you work with a lawyer, or not even a lawyer, maybe even your accountant or your financial planner, then you'll be able to sort of set up a plan to make sure that you're cared for, make sure that the money that you need every month is coming out. But you don't necessarily want to give access to one child, if you have 3 or 4 children, to all of your assets.
Right.
So, I mean, first of all, this is what I tell people when it comes to their estate planning. Number one, you need to make sure that you have enough to support yourself till the day you die. And that's very difficult to estimate. Today, care homes there are so many levels of care available for individuals. If you're someone that's worth $1 million, I think you don't deserve to live in a place where your food is bad, your care is bad. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we live in a world where everything costs money. So there are levels of care you can get in various places. I've always been of the opinion, spend it on yourself. Listen, my parents were East European. My dad, thankfully, my mom got to live the life that they wanted, but they didn't have to scrimp because they thought they were saving for their daughter or their son. I have a sister. You know what? If you die with nothing, you die with nothing, but make sure you live a happy life. You only get one turn in this world. So there are different quality care facilities. If you have $1 million and it costs $5,000 a month, think about it. With a good financial planner, a good real estate agent, you will achieve the most money available to take care of yourself till you die. Whatever you leave to your kids, they should be thankful that they get it. And that's it.
It's funny how so many people want to put their kids first before themselves. I hear it all the time. I want to leave my kids lots of money. Well, that's great if we can leave them something, but we really don't know what the future looks like and what that's going to cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I often tell people. So we work for a relatively prominent religious organization. We do their will program. And I have to say that it's most important that whoever you're talking to about your state gives you a realistic picture of what your state looks like. Right? Very few people, I know I don't, although I've been telling my wife I want to move into an assisted living place already, but obviously they won't take me yet.
You're not ready.
They won't take me yet. But the thing is, those places are expensive. You're looking at least $5,000 or $6,000 a month. So if you have $1 million in the bank, and if you're earning 6% on that money, which is reasonable, right? You're earning $60,000 a year. So if you're paying $5,000 a month, that's it. I guess the good news is when you're really old and you're in one of those places, you're not going to the casino, you're not going to the bar, so you don't have a lot of expenses. So it can fit. You can save money for your kids. So I guess, but the truth is most people who work hard have a home. The home is their biggest asset. Mm-hmm. They sell it. Hopefully they sell it for the most they can using Keller Williams, and they'll end up with $600,000 in the bank, right? And so $600,000 in the bank, same return, nets you $30,000 a year. Mm-hmm. $3,000 a year is not going to make a pretty retirement home. So now you're So what I have to deal with, and if I can tell anybody anything, show your parents some respect. Don't put them in a place that only meets what their return is so that you can end up with the most money possible. And I get it. It's hard for kids today because houses are expensive and stuff is tough. And I know that people are waiting. This is something that annoys me. There are people that are waiting for their parents to die so they can get the money to buy a house. And maybe it's the government's fault. I don't know whose fault it is. But at the end of the day, you only have one mother, one father, one brother, one sister. Whatever it is that's left over, I think it's important to make sure your parents go to their great reward knowing that whatever they did in their life took care of them.
Yeah.
And then whatever they leave for you to take care of you, that's great.
Yeah. Leon, tell me, the one question that I get asked a lot is, should I add my kids' names to my real estate? So you're a homeowner,
It's a great
you have a
question.
home, you have more than one kid, and people want to put their kids' names on because they want to avoid any type of taxes or whatever, but they're not really thinking clearly.
Question.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Here's what I tell people about that. There are certain pitfalls that come with doing that. So
Right.
generally speaking, it seems like a good idea. But there's so many factors to consider. Like if you're going to go on your parents' title, do you already own a house? If you already own a house, then you're now on title for a second house. That, at least as far as CRA is concerned, would be an investment property. So, and it depends on how long you're going to hold on to it, because if it's an investment property, you're going to pay capital gains on it.
100%.
The other thing is, and I see this in my office. So, if a 60-year-old fellow comes in with his 30-year-old daughter and says, gee, I want to add her on to title, I'm going to be like, well, you might be living there for another 20 years, and anything you do with the house is going to require her permission. Is that really what you want? I mean, again, real estate ownership is one of the few things that in the new country, the United States and Canada, became something that people could do. We're no longer serfs. We no longer, work land that's owned by a royal person. So why do you want to give it away so fast? Just to avoid the smallest tax of all.
But they're really not avoiding a tax. From what I understand is if it's my principal residence and I die, well, there's not really any taxes
right.
on that.
There's
but does it go to probate and then you pay
that's
taxes?
But then that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Probate is the smallest tax of all.
Totally.
Probate is 1.5%.
Right.
Right? It is literally like if probate tax was the only tax anyone ever had to pay, I'd be like, put all your money into something that's going into probate.
Right. Can you explain to our listeners what is probate?
Okay.
Just so they know.
So probate is a tax that one pays when they, by the way, it isn't always payable. It's something that people pay when they have to make an application for what's called a certificate of appointment. And it's either with a will or without a will. Some people die without a will. And by the way, dying without a will, when people say that everything's going to government, that's not true. So don't believe that. Everyone should have a will, by the way, but it's not as scary as what perhaps some of my competitors or the online will people will make you think. That being said, when you die with a will, if you own real estate and you're the only person on title, then you have to apply for probate. Probate generally works out to, depending on the amount of the estate, 1.5% of the estate. So on $700,000, it will work out to, $10,000, I guess. What's 1.5% of $700,000? 77. Yeah, it'd be $10,000.
$10,000.
So that's what probate is. So, and in the pantheon, so there are grades of tax. There's income tax.
Right.
That's the highest one. If you own a lot of money, 52%. Then there's dividend tax. If you own a company or you receive dividends, you end up paying somewhere between 35 and 45. Capital gains is generally 25% of 50% of whatever you bought. And then there's probate, which is 1.5%.
So
Right.
here's the thing that's really important for people to know. If I already own a home and my mother puts me on her home, that's a second home. So now all of a sudden, if anything happens to her and I go to sell it one day, I have to add that capital gains to my income. When my income tax is 52%, why would I do that?
Well, and just so you know, we are in a very gray area. For the last couple of years, the government has been trying to organize this Bear Trustee Declaration, which up until now has literally just been valuable to accountants because they can charge people. So a lot of people are using the strategy you just mentioned, but it also applies to bank accounts, investment accounts, and then they backed off and they said it's not applicable. But at the end of the day, the government wants to know.
The CRA is watching.
Well, so in the U.S., they have estate taxes. We don't. Now, we pay much higher taxes in general than people in the States do, but we don't pay estate taxes, which is a big one because there's going to be a big transfer of wealth. And our government, I believe, has been trying to figure out a way to get at it without creating an uproar, or shall I say, in the best liberal way of doing things. They're looking for a way to do it so that people don't vote liberal. I mean, so that people won't not want to vote liberal. But they're looking at all of these things. They're looking at the transfer.
We can't even die without taxes, is what you're saying.
Well, no. Here we can.
We can.
Here we can die with minimal taxes. In the States, it's big taxes.
Right.
Here, it's nominal. But I think our government is looking to find a way to increase what those taxes are. And I can't give anybody any advice on what to do in advance.
But here's a question that's really important. If I don't have a lawyer that I know, or I want to do something on my own because I'm going on a trip and I don't have time to book an appointment with a lawyer, is something on the internet better than nothing, or does it count? I go onto the internet, I go on one of those wills.
That's a good question. Yeah. So as someone who's been ranting and raving about these online processes, I guess something is better than nothing. But I'll give you a little anecdote then to maybe put that in perspective. My father was a mechanic. He learned to work on vehicles in the Army. When he came to Canada, he opened up a garage. He literally had like a 3-bay garage for 50 years. I worked there all the time. And I'll say my dad's favorite day was when someone would come in and say, oh, I was trying to change my own spark plug and the spark plug broke. And that would be his favorite day. He'd be like, oh, you have a problem. Now we need to get a tow truck. We need to tow your car over. We're going to have to bore that spark plug and pull that spark plug out. You might even need a whole engine job. That was he loved that. That was his favorite day because people would DIY it. So now we live in a world where people DIY their accounting, their legal work, their home purchases or sales. Like, listen, do you like property guys or whatever, those guys, what do people get? Nothing. They just get a bunch of paperwork. And as a real estate lawyer, I can tell you, there are a lot of issues with those deals.
Well, AI is going to make things worse because people think they become experts all of a sudden. I mean, AI is a beautiful tool if you use it correctly.
Frankly, because I don't use AI, I have no opinion on AI. I know my son, is planning on a career in the law, and I've told him that I think certain areas of the law will be occupied by AI. Listen, I don't see how AI can take over the buying of a house.
No.
Right? Because someone needs
We're
to
not
take
going
you through
anywhere.
that house.
We realtors are not going anywhere.
Exactly. Now, interior decorating, well, I don't know.
Designers are not going anywhere
may
either.
have some, but that being said, I don't know. I don't know what AI's capabilities are, but I know that hopefully I'll be long past this mortal coil by the time I actually have to worry about it.
Right. So let me ask you this. First of all, explain to us what an executor is, and then how do I choose the right executor?
Ooh, so the executor is in charge of managing your estate. So the executor has some serious responsibilities. They have to collect all of your assets, right? Then they have to review your will and do whatever they can. Usually the first responsibility is to make sure that any bills you have, anything else are paid. Then the rest is to protect your assets. So, for example, if you were living in a home that you owned when you died, your executor is expected to make sure it remains insured, makes sure that all the bills are paid, property taxes, everything else. Then they have to review the will, and depending on whether probate is required or not, they need to manage probate, and then they need to manage the distributions to all of the individuals. And again, it depends on the estate. I'm talking about a relatively simple estate. Middle class family, own a house, 2 people, 2 kids out there, whatever. That's a simple, but and so that's, I think, something that people need to think about. When you're choosing trustees and you're preparing your will, or you're deciding what you want the provisions of your will to be, you have to remember that your trustee is responsible for that till it's all done.
Is trustee the same as an executor?
Yes.
Okay, just a different term.
Yes. It's just another way of saying it. But at the end of the day, it's their responsibility. So, like, lately, I took over the practice of someone who was practicing in Oshawa since the 70s. So I'm literally dealing with people who are either power of attorney or trustees, and they're now in their 80s or 90s. And I mean, one fellow, as an example, sadly, just discovered that he has pancreatic cancer, which is a very tough road of treatment and not always successful. And he was the sole trustee for one of his sister's children who was disabled. What do we do, right? How do we manage that? I'm not going to say how we manage it, but we are managing it. It's challenging. So when you're thinking of things, I mean...
So are you recommending that people have 2, like a backup in their will?
Always.
Okay.
Always.
Either or, like jointly or severally, they can act together or apart, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, jointly is up to you. If you have 2 siblings that you want jointly, or 2 children or 3 children, although, again, that depends on the circumstances. Some people have 3 kids, 2 of them are wonderful, and one of them is perhaps not wonderful, but getting by.
Right.
And they don't want them touching the money. I mean, everybody's circumstances are a little bit different, but I would say that you need to be thoughtful about it in that how complicated you want to make your will. And my advice is, generally speaking, complexity should be based on, and I know this is going to sound crass and terrible, but it's the truth. Complexity should be based on value. If your entire estate is worth $500,000 and you have 2 children, unless they're both completely irresponsible people, you don't want a complicated will.
No. Right? Make it super simple, super easy.
Now, if you're somewhere between $5 and $10 million in assets, then you want to be dealing with a lawyer who can talk to you about what your options are, how to manage those assets. And that lawyer is also going to ask you some hard questions about your family. Do you have... And none of this is meant to make anybody feel bad or feel terrible. But, in some families, if you have 3 children, you'll have 1 good child and maybe 2 children that are...
There's always a bad one.
I don't like to say that because, truthfully, I think my parents thought I was the bad one.
Mm-hmm. And, I would agree.
And maybe I was. Yeah, you would agree. I have my weaknesses for sure. But one of my weaknesses is not always telling the truth to people. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea is, if it's not complicated, do a willful. Go online, do whatever. If you have, a bunch of children, if you're a blended family, blended families are very complex, and there are many issues that can arise. And it's funny, I remember a lawyer that was, he'd like to think he was a mentor, but he wasn't. But he used to always make a big deal about blended families, only because he thought it was an opportunity to bill more.
Right.
It's not about billing more. It's about getting it right.
It's about safety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that if I had to speak with my my right brain, the brain that is empathetic and loving, is that when you're thinking about your will, you should think about it with love in your heart. And just think about why it is you did whatever you did, whatever it is you saved whatever you saved, and who is it that you need to take care of and how. Like, we deal with a lot of families that have children that are on ODSP or are handicapped. And I think actually in Durham Region, we're probably relatively specialized in that area because we will provide you with the best advice possible. Do you need a Henson Trust? Will a Henson Trust make sense? How old do you need to be to create the Henson's Trust? Why do any of us do any of this? Is that hopefully we'll leave a legacy behind us, whether it's, and it doesn't always has to be a little bit of money, a lot of money. It can just be whatever it is we did.
So let me just stop you for 1 second. The Henson Trust, I know a little bit about that. So I know that you either have to be disabled or on ODSP to actually qualify for a Henson Trust so that nobody calls you. Is there anything else?
No qualification. You can always create a Henson's Trust.
Okay.
But it's created especially for people who have beneficiaries that receive ODSP.
Okay. So it does protect that portion of the estate. So, for example, I think they can only get up to $10,000 a year. Is that correct?
So ODSP sets limits on how much people can receive monthly and annually. And yeah, it's not, it is about $10,000.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing to consider, but it depends on the circumstances as well. So I have families that move everything into the trust for the child that is on ODSP. And then even though they can only use X amount of dollars, eventually it flows down. They want to at least make sure that that amount is available. Not to mention, ODSP at the age of 65 stops.
Right.
And then you're CPP, and the same rules don't apply.
And that's not enough for somebody to live on.
Well, no, but so like I said,
If the ODSP went away, your old age security and your CPP is probably not enough for a lot of people to live on.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't need to only receive. So the idea is the ODSP should only be while your Henson's Trust should reflect the fact that if and when they're in receipt of ODSP, these are the rules. When ODSP stops, then it's done. And then we can.
Leon, I can tell you a lot of people don't know about this. So if you don't know about a Henson Trust and you want more information, please call Leon Efraim. We'll give you his information a little bit later on. It is a very beneficial program for people that are on ODSP.
It is.
Yeah, perfect. So can we just talk about power of attorney for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Should you have one for medical and real estate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about who would you choose?
Well, let's start off with the personal care.
Right.
Okay. I think you choose somebody who is close enough to you to know your wishes.
So just so you know, my daughter's a doctor. So even though I have a honey, I definitely am putting my daughter down as my power of attorney for medical.
So that's the interesting thing about, generally speaking, like, so people talk to me about living wills, my instructions, should I be on a machine and everything else. And, I mean, you have a daughter that's a doctor and a son-in-law that's a doctor.
Yeah.
And I think they'd both tell you if you ask them. At the end of the day, the doctors come in, they talk to the family, and the family the doctors will say, there's no chance. Mm-hmm. There's no chance of recovery. There's no chance of them getting better. For their own benefit, you need to pull the plug.
Right.
Right. And so, because there's this concept of the living will. This is separate and apart from the powers of attorney. This concept of the living will and what do I want to have happen if I'm on a machine or not. And In Canada, we don't really, it's not as stringent as it is in the US, but we do have what's called a directive. And we do that with our clients, and it's attached to their power of attorney for personal care. But at the end of the day, the doctors will advise. That's the personal care. Personal care means somebody who's close to you, but not just somebody who's also available, because emergencies happen when we least expect them, right? So someone who is available, is there to answer the phone, or will answer the phone within an hour or whatever, because if you're in the hospital and you're sick and you're dying, somebody needs to answer that call.
I also believe, Leon, if you travel a lot, your partner should be power of attorney for medical as well, so that they can make decisions if you're out of country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or whoever you're traveling with.
Right.
Yeah, good point. I think power of attorney for property is a little more like the will, because at some point, someone has to declare that you're incapable of managing your affairs for that power of attorney to kick in.
Right.
So for that one, I would suggest you choose someone who you know is reliable when it comes to financial matters, somebody that you trust with your money, somebody, if it's not one of your trustees or your beneficiaries, someone who has an interest in making sure that they comply with whatever is going to your beneficiaries, right?
Right.
But yeah, but it's important to have them. If you're getting a will done, honestly, you need to get your powers of attorney done at the same time.
Yes.
There's no, if you're saving $200, you're not really saving money. You're not, in fact, in all likelihood, you're more likely, or let's put it this way, your power of attorney comes into effect while you're still alive. So if nobody's in charge and you have a child that's in charge of all your bank accounts and you're in the hospital, and that child, maybe they've been waiting for you to die all these years. And while you're in the hospital, boom, all of a sudden your bank account, and believe me, I only bring this up because
You've seen it all.
I've seen it. So now there's no money in your bank account, and miraculously you survived. And all your other kids, everyone's like, who is the power of attorney? My God, can we sue the power of attorney? Can we call the police? And the answer is no, because you gave them the power of attorney. You put them on all your bank accounts. So, power of attorney, I think, honestly, is a more important document than your will. And I'll tell you why. You're dead. When your will comes into effect, you're dead.
Right.
So if you made mistakes, you made whatever, I'm not going to speak on what happens to us when we're done, but I'm pretty sure once we're dead, there's nothing we can do to fix it.
Well, Leon, I actually have a story to tell you, because once, so I'm really one of the first people in when there's somebody's either in the hospital as a power of attorneys are calling us in, or the executors are calling us in. And one time I sold a house for the power of attorney medical because she wasn't expected to live and she was in the hospital. Do you know about, after I sold it, about a year later, my sister sees her at the Curtis flea market, and her voice was very distinctive, and she called my sister from behind, and my sister did a double take and said, "Oh, I thought you were gone." And she's like, "Oh no, but they sold my house." So it happens.
And they did it under power of attorney.
Yes.
And she was probably like, and now I'm living
I don't know where
this
she was
mall. I'm living in a tent in the parking lot. See, this is what I mean. Your power of attorney is truly, I think, the most serious document. Your will is a beautiful document because
your wishes.
It is the only time you can ever express. So, this is going to sound silly, but, you can do almost whatever you want. Now, I think it's been decided in court that you can't do anything that violates societal norms.
Right.
Right? So you can't say, gee, if my daughter marries so-and-so, I'm not leaving them any money, or that is all not allowed. But if you say, if my son marries this woman, I don't want any of my money going to the child that woman already had when he married her. Right. That kind of thing. There are a lot of things you do get to decide some stuff. But when you're doing it under power of attorney, you're basically deemed to be unable to manage your affairs, and whoever your attorney is, they do whatever they want.
So choose wisely. Okay, rapid fire.
I'm dangerous with rapid fire.
Oh no, rapid fire is good. Most underrated part of a will.
Oh, most underrated part of a will. Distribution. Yeah.
Okay.
People don't pay attention. Yeah.
Coffee or tea while you're writing up your legal documents?
Neither.
No?
Water.
Oh my, that's pretty good. I'm a coffee drinker. More stressful, estate planning or buying a house? What do you think?
Ooh. I would say estate planning because well, it depends. If you're the first time home buyer, that's the most stressful thing you're ever going to do. For anybody that already owns that, yeah. So I would say buying a house.
Yeah.
Buying a house.
It's funny. I've done both, and I think they're equally as stressful depending on, like you said, if it's a basic will, it's easy. It's more like choosing the right executor and who do you want to have what, and what about your bonus grandchildren? Like there's lots of things to consider.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
And when you're buying a house, it's like, again, my advice to people buying a house is don't get too attached to what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Right? Or don't get too attached to the house that you want to own. But that's hard for some people. So I think and also it's the biggest purchase they're ever going to make. So
you got to get both right. Let's put it that way.
that's right. I like that.
One document everyone should have by the age of 40.
Birth certificate.
Birth certificate?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say wills and estates, of course. Give me a will.
Okay, a will.
Okay, this is important. TV lawyer you wish was real.
Oh, TV lawyer I wish was real.
Can I answer?
Yes.
Harvey from Suits.
No, you see, I thought of that, but I only watched 3 seasons. I got tired. It was good for 3 seasons. I want to say Joe Pesci from My Cousin Vinny.
What's harder, drafting your own will or your parents?
So definitely your parents. You should never draft your own will, and you always have to deal with your parents.
Right. Perfect. One thing people always forget to include in a will.
One thing they forget to include in a will.
Jewelry?
No, because that just goes to whoever is named. I think one thing they forget to include fees to the trustees.
Oh, that's a good one. Just so you know, I had a client who capped their fees for their executors. And before he passed away, he actually inherited a lot of money and didn't kind of know that he was going to inherit that kind of money. And it took them 10 years to settle the estate with Princess Margaret and a bunch of other charities that were involved. 10 years, and he capped their fees. Don't cap your executors' fees.
And that reminds me, charitable contributions. So, because we do a lot of that. So as I mentioned, we're dealing with Oshawa. So we do a lot of work for one of the more prominent religious organizations. If you're going to be leaving money, you need to be specific about how that works.
So in terms of how
much, how it goes, who it goes to, and what parameters are around that money.
Okay, perfect. Well, that was great. Thank you. Leon, thank you so much for coming in today. That was incredible. We're going to do it again. We're going to talk about other topics, but wills and estates, it's been on my mind because I can't believe how much infighting happens, first of all. When somebody dies, the fights that I hear about over money are unbelievable. I have clients right now that all 3 siblings don't talk to each other. I don't understand how that can happen, but it happens.
Can I add one last thing then? So parents, if you raised your kids to all get along, which I think most parents do, and you love all your children, don't create an estate that will pit them against each other.
Beautifully said, Leon.
I mean, first of all, again, a lot of this is defined by what your estate is worth. And so perhaps rich people do strange things. And that's fine because they pay lawyers a lot of money to do these strange things.
They do.
But if you love your family, if you love all your kids equally, and if you want your kids to love each other, you don't want to put them against themselves. And especially, again, if you had a decent family, I always personalize these things. And you can ask my clients. I tell them about my own personal experiences all the time. There's 2 years difference between my sister and I, and we're not the same people. We have our issues, but we were raised to love each other, and we do love each other. And when my father died last year, we managed the estate beautifully without any issues. And we did some advanced planning because, well, there was a lawyer involved. But
You better have.
but I think it's hard for me. Again, Tracy knows me. Sometimes I just let my mouth run or whatever. But
That's why you're a lawyer.
if you're a family of 3 kids and your parents were worth $600,000 at the time that they died, firstly, if they're still alive, spend that money on them. Don't save it for yourself. It's their money. Please believe that. And then whatever they leave you, don't fight over it. And
Be grateful.
And by the
Be
way,
grateful.
if you're a kid that ended up staying in the house to take care of your parents, I love you. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. But chances are it was because you were free and able to do that. So don't think you did more than your other siblings did raising their family or did whatever. Like, we have enough fighting in this world. Families need to stick together and not fight over money.
Beautifully said, Leon. Thank you so much for coming in today. Can you give our viewers your phone number and your email address?
905-576-5666. It's at Thomas Efraim LLP.com. So ThomasEfraim LLP.com.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to join the conversation down in the comments and be sure to follow us on all our social platforms. I'm Tracy Mullin, and thanks for watching this episode with Leon Efraim. See you next time.